We're talking today about Job's first experiment in grief. We left off last time with talking about that, just kind of introducing it, and it being the formal form of grief, where he tears his robes and shaves his head, bows down and worships, and he confesses in faith, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." So at the end of last time, I asked the question we're going to pick up with this time. This is I'm thinking about in Job. For Job, that's a legitimate expression. There's of one of many of grief, of experiencing trauma, and his gut reaction, his first reaction is to worship. But there's also the formality of this grief, where people tear their robes when they're in mourning in the Bible. So it makes me think, okay, so what is it for people in general? What good is ritual mourning? Rituals or having a to-do list to mourning, or kind of what's in that first reaction. So I'm going to ask Kevin that question, because he knows more about the way people suffer now and deal with it in grief.
Yeah, I think my response to that would be, one, I don't think we grieve well in our culture, and so, as far as having a to-do list, in Job, his is much more laid out for him than what I would say ours is today. But I do think it serves a purpose in that it gives people ways to begin to let go, and it gives them a specified time or a way to focus on the actual letting go process. So I think there's the emotional part of it, where you're experiencing the trauma and the grief, and then there are the steps that you decide to take, to get to the place of releasing and letting go.
Okay, so when you say you don't think that we grieve well,
Mm-hmm.
what should we be doing better in your mind?
Well, I mean, I think in our culture we expect to be, go for a week of crying, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And if it goes beyond that, we want to medicate. We want to find ways to avoid the pain. And I think that's what's really different about Job, is that it seems like he embraces the pain and lives into it, versus avoiding it. But I think in our culture, most of our rituals revolve around avoidance of our pain.
Okay. All right, so here's my other question with Job. Because he's faithful, right? And a lot of the typical way that people think of Job, even now, is as the patience of Job, the faithfulness of Job, and it's wrapped up in this confession of faith, right? I guess I want to legitimize that as a real way of grieving, not the only way, but a real way. As I hear critical scholars talk about this sort of being naive, like how could Job possibly?
Job's naive.
Yeah, or this story, how could this possibly be legitimate? I mean, he's just lost everything in his life, and here he is confessing in faith. I guess I know people who have suffered and have maintained faith, and it's not easy, but still, blessed be the name of the Lord. I don't know. Is that a okay place to stay?
To stay or to start?
It's kind of both, right? Job certainly does not stay there, but some people never go to the next step that Job does, to just want to die, or maybe they do internally, but they don't say it out loud. I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, we might say clinically they're avoiding going to the place of realizing their own pain with that if they stayed in this blessed be the name of the Lord. But I do think so I think a lot of counselors would push towards that. But I would say, from my own personal experience and my own just dealing with people who've walked through some really intense suffering, the blessed be the name of the Lord response is a legitimate one. I mean, I think you can. It's a choice. I don't think Job ever indicates in this passage, when he says blessed be the name of the Lord, it doesn't indicate anything about his emotional state. I mean, he very well could have been in the depths of despair already, and he's scratching himself with pots and putting ashes on his head, and his friends are weeping with him for 7 days before he even begins to speak. So we don't know his emotional state. And I would say, because we don't know his emotional state, we probably, based on the things that are happening around him, could assume that he doesn't necessarily feel all of that. Blessed be the name of the Lord. This is a joyous occasion. Right. I think what's as powerful is that he's speaking that in the midst of his pain.
He's not celebrating his suffering.
Yes.
But he is worshiping in spite of his suffering.
And I think that's really important.
Okay, so then...
So yes, we could stay there. I think we could stay in that place.
Yeah, okay. So the next experiment with grief that we'll be talking about is after those 7 days, right? So I think Job wants to die, honestly. Job expects to die.
In the second experiment?
Before the second experiment. Like in the 7 days of waiting, I mean, surely the next step is that God would kill him, right? And then when he doesn't die, I think it infuriates him. And so that's where, and maybe the time lapse is just the ongoing nature of the suffering is what sends him into the depths that we see in chapter 3. So next time we'll talk about experiment number 2. And it's not, I guess I don't want to, well, we'll talk more about how to frame these experiments in grief, but his escapism, just wanting out, wanting to die, that we see in chapter 3.
Which is also a quote-unquote legitimate response, I think, that people go to. So, which is why it's important for us as we're talking about this. Yeah,
certainly the first one is legitimate, but all these others that we'll see too they're just faces of grief.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for being with us. We are going to take a couple of weeks before we come back and do another Facebook Live discussion of Facebook, but for the holidays, be well.
And we want to invite you to comment with questions that you might have about this whole conversation, because obviously we can't cover all the material in this discussion, but we want you to be a part of the discussion, and we'd be happy to answer any questions in the question feed. Y'all have a Merry Christmas.